I don't think anyone's listening.
But we're trying to we're not quite ready to release that to the public, but it's the most.
So when do we start?
I think 5 minutes ago.
5 minutes ago. Okay, cool. So do you want me to start and then like you will continue if you want?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So hello everyone.
Hello.
So this is the link rod session. So has anyone seen the Tim Berners-Lee article called "Cool URIs Don't Change"?
What
Yeah.
don't change?
Cool URIs don't change. Cool URLs don't change. Cool uniform resource identifiers don't change.
I have not.
So he wrote it. I think he wrote it in like 96 or 98, like a pretty long time ago. And I was doing a presentation about it a number of years ago, and I actually wanted to see like if the URL that it was published at, if it actually changed or not, right? Because that was like, even like 5 years ago, that was still like 15 years since it was published, right? So I went to the archive, right, web.archive.org, and I think the earliest mention, I don't remember what the earliest mention was, but I think it was from maybe like 2003 or something like that. I don't think it was from 1998, or maybe it was at least within a couple of years after it was published. And it was almost the exact same article. I think there was some addendum done, like some small addendum done past it. And the URL was indeed the same. It's the same as it was like 5 years ago when I last looked at that article. So, and that's relatively uncommon. If you look at some of the URLs from even like from 6 months ago, then a lot of them are already invalid. I was just looking at the Wikipedia page for linkrod. Just Google linkrod, right? And it mentions that even for like the law opinions, for Supreme Court opinions, half of the links that they cite in order to make their opinion, they no longer contain the same information that they did when the opinion was made. So that's obviously a problem, right? Because you have the legally binding opinion setting a precedent, right? And the stuff that they're discussing, it's completely non-trivial for like a regular person to actually find that information, right? It could have been archived by the archive, or potentially was not. And even if it was archived, you still kind of have to figure out like how to find that. And very often when those problems happen, they don't even happen for a good reason. Like people just redesign the website and they decide to like invalidate the URLs. Sometimes it's as simple as like adding some extra kind of like parameter to the URL and then not bothering to provide like a rewrite scheme. So it's actually pretty easy to like to do like rewrite schemes if you, for example, if you want to move a whole bunch of sections to like a different subsection, right? Or like to a different domain name. It's actually very easy to do that both with Apache and Nginx. There's this thing called rewrite rules, and you can get like a regular expression, and you can basically map the old URLs to the new URLs. So even if you do have to change the URLs, then it's still relatively easy to kind of change that. So what has like people's experience been with like the URLs changing or not changing?
It's a bitch.
It's a problem. I mean, if I go back and look at my posts on my blog from
Right.
in the early 2000s or even 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
half the links don't work anymore, or more. I mean, it's really especially rare to find a link that's still working.
Right. And I think the problem is that like even if you use the tools like archive, like web.archive.org, very often a lot of blogs they're not designed with the archiving in mind. So when you try to use those tools, they don't actually archive stuff properly. So I was recently trying to archive like some Reddit stuff, right? They did the new redesign, and the new redesign is just horrible. Like it's such a downgrade. And I think that's actually like the reason I suggested this talk. It's kind of like a rant, right? Because almost every single redesign that happens in like most technology companies nowadays, it just goes completely downhill. Like the whole thing just goes completely downhill. So with Reddit, for example, if you try to archive the new stuff on webarchive.org, it just doesn't archive anything at all. It just shows like some like nearly blank page, right? And then they have this thing like if you log in, then you can actually you can still have the capability to actually look at the old design, right? So when you logged in, you don't even see that this new design, like how horrible it is, right? Unless you opted into it. But if you're not logged in, then you're shown the new design by default. So there's a workaround. If you're not logged in, there's a workaround by changing the www to old. So instead of going to like reddit.com, you go to old.reddit.com, and then you see the old design. So I tried archiving with WebArchive. I tried archiving like some of the old pages, right? Because I thought that like old pages they render properly, right? And they used to be capable of being archived, right? So I tried that. But of course, they actually have like a robots.txt defined on the all.reddit.com. And that robots.txt is basically says that like these pages cannot be archived. So basically like there's no solution. Like there's no solution essentially to archive Reddit, right? And it's pretty popular, and there's like a lot of discussions happening there, right? And I think it's not unreasonable to want to have like to refer back to some of that stuff, right? And there's no way to archive that. So that's obviously a problem, and I think kind of like the way that the industry kind of goes, it seems that it kind of like gets worse every single iteration, like every single redesign. People just kind of like change it to use like the completely latest and greatest frameworks, and they don't work at all when the archiving is concerned. And Reddit, it's not the only example here. I think it happens like pretty much everywhere.
When looking at even your shirt, so just like 5 days ago, someone opened a Git Hub issue because we had a link in this material that wasn't available in European countries. So for everyone in the U.S., the link worked.
Right.
But for people elsewhere, so it's like sometimes your accessibility, you change countries and a link that works just fine.
Right.
So we had to.
I think that the point that you mentioned, I think it's actually even worse because very often they don't actually tell you why it doesn't work. Like for example, there's this website called befrugal.com. It basically gives you like some sort of extra like 5% cashback or whatever on certain websites, right? And if you use like a VPN, or if you try to log into the website from outside of the US, it just says not found. Like it doesn't even give you like any sort of error message, right? Like the whole site works, right? But like if you try to log in, right, it just says not found. Like that same page, right? It works in the US, right? If your IP address says that you're located in the US, right? And if it says that you're located somewhere else, even if you physically are in the US, right? It just says not found. And I mean, if you're kind of familiar with what's going on, you might be able to detect what's going on, right? But if you're like a not technical person, like how are you even supposed to know that like not found means that like you're in Europe, they think you're in Europe and like the page is restricted to the US or whatever. Like the error messages doesn't even say that.
The Internet Archive can help with that.
Huh?
So the Internet Archive can help with that.
I'm sorry, what?
The Internet Archive can help with that.
The Internet Archive? Well, I mean,
as the person sharing the link.
Well, I mean,
save it in the Internet Archive, and then you share that one with your friend in Europe.
Well, but that's if the whole thing works, right?
I think maybe though that's if it's static. If it's a static document.
Right.
I think he's talking about like an app or something.
Yeah, I'm talking about the app, right? So you have to log in to kind of like use this stuff, right? So and like you log in and it just says like not found. So you go to a login page and it says not found. And Internet Archive, I mean, it does. It is based in the U.S., so like they have the U.S.-based IP addresses, right? So kind of like the way that things are now, right now, it's usually that like the U.S. companies block European companies so far because of the GDPR. It kind of started happening like last year, right? So right now, if you try to access any sort of like local Austin newspapers, like Austin Statesman, it just gives you an error. If you try to access like basically like any site, you go to like the local news websites, right? Like the like whatever the name of the K local site is, right? K-Sano or something, whatever. And it just gives you an error, right? It doesn't let you see the articles. I went to like the Austin subreddit recently. And I tried clicking on a couple of articles, and I was using like the VPN, right, like that had the IP address geolocated to the EU, and I couldn't access like any of the articles. I couldn't access the Austin Statesman. I couldn't access the TV newspaper, TV station website. So it is a pretty big problem.
One of the things I'm curious, I don't know exactly where you want to take the conversation with archiving, but one of the things I'm curious to hear from people is, I mean, the Internet Archive is an amazing resource, obviously. We're extremely lucky that we have it, but that's one place, and I'm curious what people think about other archives of websites. So as an example, like with Microsoft Blog, one of the features we had was, we'll host the blog for you, but you can enable Git Hub mirroring, so we'll copy everything on your blog, all the HTML, images, JavaScript, everything to a GitHub repository, so there's an extra mirror of it, and then you can have, mirror.yourdomain.com or copy.org. It's having extra copies that are actually on the web and servable. And I don't know, I'm interested in doing more stuff like that, but I don't know exactly what form it should take or what people want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would definitely work better if you kind of have the permission of the owner of the site, right? Because if you get the permission denied or whatever, then like they would be the ones that can fix it, right? But it's a little bit problematic if you're trying to archive like someone else's resource, right? So for example, like Reddit, like what am I supposed to do if I want to archive like the Reddit sub, right? So in Internet Archive, it actually honors a robots.txt. So that's why it's not going to work. But like the archive.is, like as in Iceland, it doesn't honor robots.txt, so it does archive those pages. But it's also, all of their IP addresses are geolocated to the EU, right? So if you try to use them to archive any of the news websites, and like that's not going to work, because a whole bunch of them just kind of like block the European visitors. And it's just amazing like how big the prevalence of that is. I mean, I think like LA Times, you cannot visit LA Times from Europe. I mean, that's a pretty popular publication, right? I mean, that's just completely ridiculous. Like
both those examples you're giving, LA Times and the local Austin papers, you can read via the Internet Archive. So exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like, do you really want to be doing that? I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Well, it saves a copy of the article as you read it, so you know that doesn't change based on whatever.
Well, sure, but the point of the web is that you click a link, right, and the link is supposed to work. So you click a link and it doesn't work.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it's a status, like you have the unauthorized status code, and that's effectively, what's going on. It's basically saying, based on the information we have about your user agent, you're not authorized to access this resource for whatever reason. I think they added a new status code that kind of deals with this, which is, yes, the internet makes the entire world like accessible, but laws and contracts and corporate policy and user policies don't go away. I mean, yeah, of course we believe that you should, we believe that we should route around them, but
well, but I mean, just because there is, I think there was like some talk about the new status code. I think it was something to do with like not permitted by policy or something like that, right? I don't remember like the number for it, but we can probably look it up. But it still doesn't resolve the issue, right?
Well, but I mean, so the reason why you may say we don't serve EU subjects, or we don't serve the people in the geographical region of the EU is because the EU has a regulatory regime, and the site provider, the content provider is saying,
well, but
we
I think
cannot confidently comply with these regulations, and we don't want to open ourselves up to that liability.
Well, but I think you kind of have, instead of kind of like defending them, I think you kind of have to step back and look what the issue actually is. It's a newspaper. It's text. Like, why they even have to comply with GDPR? Like, why are they even collecting any information? Like, it's text. Like, for all I care, it would take them the same amount of information. It would take them less. It would probably take them less kind of like frustration, less user frustration, much more goodwill if they just spew like the text without any sort of links, without any sort of like pixels or whatever, just like the RSS feed, right? Try to access their article and you just give them the RSS feed. Like that would completely solve the problem, and that would completely comply with GDPR because you're not going to be collecting any sort of information if you just provide like the just text, right, without any sort of images, without any sort of pixels. So,
If you don't
huh?
log your access
Well, I mean, and that's only part of it too. The other thing is that there's not just the logging of who accesses things, but also there's all the other information that wants to be, or needs to be tracked, needs and quoting fingers by the publication. Because to us, it's just a newspaper and it's just text content, but really it's text content surrounded by 100 million advertisements that are the way that they get their money to pay the people writing the content in the first place.
Well, but they do have RSS feeds, right?
I don't know. I mean, some of them do, a lot of them don't anymore. I mean,
But I mean, it's like completely trivial to generate an RSS feed from an article, right?
It is, but that's not going to monetize that content, and so that's not something that they are willing to do.
But it literally takes like an intern. It literally like an intern can do that stuff for you.
I know, but
What's their motivation?
right.
Well, the motivation is the goodwill of the people. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So we're really talking from where you're both right? So the corporate structure has the corporate constraints, and as citizens of the world, we have this desire for reliable information, and reliable information that's not subject to revision too. And the thing that scares me about all this is that there's a link from Wikipedia that tells me X. I come back next year and go to that link. The link's still the same, and I follow it. And there's something completely different there. And so there's something to be said not only for URI to be permanent, but that if there's a revision, it should be a new URI.
Right.
But on the other hand, we have the internet turning into an entertainment medium, and the motivations of the purveyors of this distraction are completely different. So the question is, whose web is it? I understand the motivations of the corporation, and I understand when I'm sitting in Canada and people give me a link to this funny thing on Saturday Night Live, and I click on it and it doesn't happen. Right? It bothers me. I'm irritated, but it's just a joke that I don't get to see. But this is pervasive. It's everywhere. You probably see it less in this country, but when you travel, it's just you're not American enough. You can't see this thing. And it's not fun.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe to try to move things from, the right session, which is useful because, I mean, you have to exercise what the pain points are, but then it's like, well, are there steps that we can take to mitigate, as much as possible? And so I guess the thing is the web, whose web is it? I mean, it's a network, right? And so it's like ownership is in the endpoints. And we vote. We vote with our dollars, we vote with our clicks, we vote with our attention. And it's, some things you can't really control. But I think some of it, I think it's funny that Tim Berners-Lee said, URIs, they should never break, they should never change. But I mean, from a technical standpoint, it's a client-server architecture. The services, those resources are provided access via service by servers. And so if you have to have servers there, the servers go away, right? Like that's a single point of failure. So I think for the protocols, for the services, for the communities that we use currently, we have to have escape hatches, right? Into protocols, into practices, into communities that are robust against that kind of failure. So, so one suggestion might be, all right, I have my website. Some people use WordPress, and that's like your content is in a database. The pages are dynamically generated by some backend, and other people, like their websites are statically generated. They're produced by static site generators. So it's like they can always just take their bundle of files and they can move it somewhere else, right? They can move the static site somewhere else, or they can take those files and use a totally different code base to rebuild the site.
But they're still not immune to link rot though. It's still you could use like a different site generator, and then it could have slightly different like slugs. So for example, it could have like underscores instead of dashes, or it could have dashes instead of underscores.
Well, like what I'm hearing out of that is the easier it is to make a copy of a
Right.
website, the better off it will be, right? So
Yeah,
like,
for
a
sure.
website is really easy to make a copy.
Right.
So,
And they're, like, people should, I think, have more than one copy of their website, even if it's not always live and updated. Like, there should be,
Right.
because like if you don't have more than one copy, it's just something, I don't know, something can go wrong, or you lose a server.
Right.
So how do we make that easier? Is there any conventions to like have people follow?
Problem there, though, is I actually have my homepage from 1994 up on the web, not as its original URL. And I just went through it and tried to find any links that worked. And almost all of them fail because the server that they were on is no longer there. And there's no way for me to discover where that content has moved to. Like, a lot of that content probably still exists at some other location. And it doesn't help that somebody has a copy of it, because
Right. So
how do you
there's
find the copy?
the first step, I think, is having a copy, but then the second step is you're right. There needs to be some kind of relationship between the original and the copy, so that you could automatically update links, for example.
There's one technique that a bunch of us started doing a few years ago, which is with everything we post on our websites, let it know we post it, we automatically call the Internet Archive for every single link.
Right.
And
There's
that
actually
way, like the version of what you link to
right.
is actually saved in the Internet Archive. Now, at some point after the point you find these broken links, you can literally know, because you know when you publish the post.
Right.
So you can go to the Internet Archive on that day and look for that link because you saved it. And so that's something you could potentially like auto repair.
I think there's also like some bookmarking services on the internet that you can they automatically archive the stuff for you when you add the bookmark. And I think that you mentioned like the automatic archiving. I think there's also like a Twitter bot called Link Archival or something like that. And it would basically automatically archive the stuff with you. I don't remember if they use archive.is or WebArchive, but they basically every single tweet that the way that it works is that you follow it, and then it follows you back. And then every single message that you post, if it has a link, then it would automatically archive it for you right away.
But
So,
for the use case he was talking about, like the links he added to his site,
right,
I feel like the right answer there is automation. So like your CMS, whatever you're using,
right,
should automatically call the Internet Archive with every single thing you link to in your posts.
Right.
So I do that. I know there's a WordPress plugin to do it. What's that? There's a known plugin that does it, I'm pretty sure. You could probably file a micro.blog feature request
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
to do it. And that essentially protects your content in a way.
right.
I think I like that a lot. I still feel like, again, Internet Archive is amazing, but also it's really hard to have a whole copy of the internet in one place. So, like, I still feel like there should be some other archive outside of the Internet Archive.
Right.
I think
Just
longer
long
term-
term, just
Yeah,
how does
longer
that kind of
term,
scale?
there's like, well, Internet Archive is centralized.
Right.
That's the fundamental problem there. It's like they're doing a great job.
But the
and
web is
there's
huge.
3 copies
It's
of
hard
it
to have
worldwide, but
multiple
that's still only 3 copies.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is kind of a gap between the two sort of overarching topics that we've talked about here is that we have a lot of the tools in place that can make copies of websites that allow you to do that, but we also are patrons of websites that make that difficult, and there has to be some mindfulness involved. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names, but you mentioned that you vote with your clicks and with your dollars. And to some extent, some of that needs to be not just about the content, but about the practices by who makes the content. Like, we can all say with some degree of certainty that the LA Times is a fairly reputable newspaper, but if their practices make it difficult or impossible for them to reach it from certain places, or to make copies of it easily, then that's something that we need to say, no, this is not something that we back, and this is not something we can tolerate because it's not going to have those properties that we need.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I think like from my perspective, I think Google should be doing like a better job about it. Like if I search for something, right, and then like all of the links I find, they all lead to like GDPR notices instead of like the actual text, right? That's a problem. I think they should be potentially using using some sort of logistic to automatically determine whether any given website, whether it's going to be giving like those GDPR notices to certain clients. And then they should be basically kind of like replicating that and removing that. And they should probably also showing it to the owners in the like the master tools, right? Because right now I'm not sure how it works. Like if you have the GDPR, like those GDPR notices, right? If you get any sort of like notice from Google, right? But I know as far as like the client, I know as far as the user goes, right? I just get like those websites in my search results, and none of them work, right? And that's obviously a problem, and I think it's a problem that potentially I'm pretty sure like at LA Times they don't even realize like how much stuff do they actually lose by that, right? Because they might not be able to sell the advertisement for European users. But those European users are still responsible for upvoting the articles, right? Upvoting the articles on Reddit, posting the articles to some sort of like third-party aggregators, right? So it's kind of very easy to just dismiss those users as like non-revenue generating users, right? But they still part of the goodwill community, and they still should be accounted for. And I don't think that's happening right now, to be honest.
I admire your wanting goodwill to be a factor, but when it comes down to it, these are businesses and not.
Well, but they're
I mean,
losing
treat
money.
them as if they're public goods, but.
Yeah, but they're losing money on the goodwill. I'm pretty sure they are losing money.
Look, there are public goods. I never cared whether it was provided by government or provided by corporations, but history is a thing, and history is something we own just by being human beings on this planet. And if we outsource that to corporations to be gathering and maintaining our history, that's fine.
Right.
But if we don't have any way to check that they're not changing it behind our backs, we're on a very, very slippery slope.
Right.
So
Exactly.
That's kind of why I'm backing you here. Is that
Yeah.
it's not that we want the LA Times to be nice. It's that they're providing a public service.
Right.
And they kind of owe something
Exactly.
to the public.
Exactly.
Because corporations exist because we set up a system whereby we expect corporations to provide us with services. It's not entirely a private thing.
Right.
There's obligations that we all have to each other. And one of them is to not systematically lie. And if you're setting up a system where if it's inconvenient for the system to remember something, it's very easy for it to forget it.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, so, I mean, I guess, so this session was sort of, like, the link rod and data preservation sort of merged with, I guess my interest in, sustainability and evolvability, right? So I guess one, right? So we have a lot of services. A lot of the stuff we use, we don't pay directly for it, right? We pay for it in the data that we give up, or there's a can being kicked down the road because it's being backed by capital, and they're hoping that it'll pop. So, there's always this question of they're offering a service, they're offering something that people want, but is it really sustainable for that organization to provide that service? And if people are pouring their time and their effort and their energy and their data into it, right? Like how do we account for like if it goes away or it needs to change ownership or whatever the case is? And I think some of the things that like the IndieWeb community and related things, I think part of our role is to be like on the leading edge
to maybe try like new media formats and new practices. But then also to look at what people are doing and kind of react, right? Because I mean, some of it is saying what it's like I don't want to suggest be reactionary, right? Just to say, all right, well, I want an open, sustainable version of Twitter or Instagram or whatever. But also, like, well, what's the thing beyond that, right? That they never thought of or they can't really easily do because of conflicts with their business model.
And the thing is, I think there, like you mentioned Twitter, right? I think there was this service called Identica. It was launched, I think, like 10 years ago, right? And I remember I did register there, right? Kind of like when it just kind of like came out, right? To get like the good username and whatever. And apparently, like it didn't really take off, right? And then at one point, I think they completely redesigned it, right? And then they basically transferred everyone from the old service to a new service. But apparently they only did that if you actually logged in during the last like 3 months or something like that before the transfer. So apparently I didn't log in during the last 3 months like before they transferred thing, right? So like I didn't get transferred. And I think that's kind of ridiculous because you specifically join like a third-party service, right? Expecting that it's going to be better than Twitter, right? Expecting that it's going to be kind of like more long-term than Twitter, right? Because Twitter is very difficult to actually kind of like find the old tweets, right? It's kind of more about the now platform, right? It's very difficult to actually go look at the history. I think I went to look at some of my history and like some of the pictures that I posted like 5 or like 10 years ago, whatever. They're not there anymore because they were being posted with this thing called TwigPic, right? Or whatever the service was called, right? And apparently it was like sold or like bought or whatever happened to it, right? Yeah, and like they
kept the URLs, but
yeah, and they just deleted everything. And that's just ridiculous. I think that's just ridiculous. I didn't even know that it got deleted, right?
in theory, they didn't get deleted, but a lot of old URLs, well, they're not linked, first of all, because they like predated how tweets are metadata, but also I think some of the URLs don't work anymore. But yeah.
Well, I think they don't seem to work. So there's a URL and you can follow it, and then like whatever the result is, just like the something not found page, right?
Well, getting back to sustainability, it's the same thing. Yeah, I mean, and I think users have gotten burned so many times. Like,
Right.
how do they? And again, I mean, I don't want to only talk about my own thing, but like, I feel this with people in terms of like, I know there's something that I want to work on for 30 years, but how do I convey that to people so they trust they can put their data in it and be okay? And you just have to trust that I'm, in this for the long haul. But it would be great if there were specific conventions or formats, or I don't know, there's some way to say, not only is this thing going to be around, but here are the steps to,
Right.
I don't know, to ensure that, or to copy your data, or I don't know, some kind of.
Well, so I think at the end of
You're asking
Right.
this is a question that the whole reason I'm in this room is because you guys haven't answered it. I mean, I think there's something to be said for going back to the idea of a distributed internet. I mean, everybody owns a whole piece of it.
Right.
Your data is on your actual physical object. It's got something.
Yeah, but how does that handle the bus factor? Because I depend on something that you are providing, and you get hit by a bus and nobody's paying your server bill.
Right.
Well, okay, so what are you relying on that on? You've got your data. So if my service goes away, you've still got your data.
So that's true if I mirror everything that I view, right? Everything that I link to.
And that's
so this idea that we'll call the Internet Archive for every link.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if you're mirroring all of that, then
So I think that's also why it's important. That's also why it's important to have the links that don't actually change, right? Because if you have the same article and it keeps changing like every like 6 months, right? You decide to like rename the URL or whatever, right? And the old one doesn't work. Then there's going to be like 20 people who post the link to like all of those different versions of their article, right? And maybe only like 2 of them get archived, right? And then people who have like the other 18 links, right? They aren't going to be able to find it because that article, it does exist in the archive,
No, it
but
does,
the
because
URL
you
is slightly
archive it with
different.
every change.
Huh?
It does, because you've archived it with every change. That's my point. Like, once your CMS is doing this is a non-problem.
Well, but that's the thing. Like everyone posts this link. So like some people will archive it and some people won't.
No, I'm saying it'll get covered both by the person changing the domain, their link, because they'll archive it, and by the person linking to it, because their CMS will auto-archive it at the point in time that they link it. So under either scenario, you're already
Well, but then,
covered.
right.
There's no but. That's like, no, you're actually double covered.
So I think in that scenario, are you sure that Web Archive, they would actually have the capacity to like archive every single page ever visited by every single person?
We're talking about text, which is trivial for them to archive, and in fact, Reno was just doing it with curl, and it's like 0.01 seconds done.
Well,
It's so fast that in real time it gives you back the permalink with
Right.
the date and time and everything.
So I think the average web page now, I think it's like 5 megabytes.
That's the JavaScript.
Yeah, and you
doesn't
cannot
matter.
and you cannot archive the pages without the JavaScript.
That's right. You can.
I think that's
You
part of
can.
the
Well,
problem.
Web Archive, it archives the whole thing. It archives like all the JavaScript, and it does it for every single page. It archives a new copy, I think.
But it sends it back to you, as far as I can tell, as soon as it's done with the main content.
Well, sure, but the thing is, it's basically
Well-
for every call, you take
Alright.
5 megabytes of data. That's a pretty
But-
significant stuff.
This is my idea. Have you ever heard of it's a Microsoft app, PhotoSend, where they can take a bunch of pictures that people like take.
Can they shut that down?
I don't know. I think a new similar thing kind of came up. I'm not sure if it's from Microsoft or not. But so one of the things we kind of deal with now is that the web that people, there's the whole metaphor of the streams and the stop, and we're kind of stuck in the streams. Like we're reading Twitter feeds or Facebook feeds or Instagram feeds, and the thing is, everybody that uses Instagram goes to Instagram.com, right? But nobody's homepage is the same. Nobody's Facebook.com is the same.
Right.
So it's sort of like, everybody kind of has a view of this big corpus of data, and it's not exactly the same. And so the thing is, like you mentioned earlier, right? You have robot.txt files that will basically stop people from crawling, bots from crawling on sites, even if you're using it for archival purposes and stuff. But it's like, okay, I'm paying Facebook with my data and with my use, right? We have a user agreement. And, once that data hits my user agent, it's on my device. They can't stop me from saving it. So,
Well, they legally
I
can.
very well save a snapshot. And we do it in informal ways. I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, there's this weird thing on Twitter with the whole cancel culture where, people say crazy stuff and then people call them on it and go and delete it, right? And so you have people and they're taking screenshots, they're like little images of the text. And so we lose the parsability of it.
But they don't
And some of them
Again,
become fake.
You can send a new tweet or link to the Internet Archive,
Right.
and it will save the text.
Right, yeah, you have to do it before somebody deletes
Before
it.
you
or
delete it,
whatever.
yeah.
But, I mean, I guess,
That was, sorry. I was just gonna jump real quick, because you said feature request markup log, I should send everything to the Internet Archive. Like, you get a new blog post, send it, get a link, send it, which is great. I can definitely do that.
Yeah.
Could Twitter do that? Every single tweet sent to the Internet Archive. Could they do
Well,
that?
that's the thing. I think archive is going to
They don't
overload.
want to business-wise, but could they technically do it?
I don't think so.
I'm sure they technically could,
Think so?
because it's just text.
Yeah.
No, but it's 2 megabytes of text. Like Internet Archive cannot archive 2 megabytes of text.
That's my question.
We've
Can
got
the
to
Internet
scale,
Archive
yeah,
scale
we've got to
to
scale.
that?
I don't think so.
So I'm actually I don't agree with your 5 megabyte, 2 megabyte assertion, because most of that is dynamically loaded JavaScript that the Internet Archive does not execute. Their
But it
crawlers
archives
will
it.
not execute JavaScript.
It archives it. It archives the whole thing.
No, only if it's script source equals. If it's a script that then dynamically loads their script by using JavaScript, which a lot of them are now, in order to make the page loads faster, Internet Archive does not access that at all.
So where does it come from when you access the copy?
It just comes from if that site is still up or not.
Right.
Well, if
But
it's
one
not
is
up, then
Internet
the
Archive
page
is not
isn't
archiving
going to
5
load.
megabytes of JavaScript. That is a false assertion.
Sure, but.
I'm pretty
Let's
sure it's
assume
not.
less than that for
Yeah.
the discussion, because then we won't debate like megabytes, but like.
Right. The problem is.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
So more and more sites are incoherent.
Right.
Like totally unusable without
Exactly.
that JavaScript.
Exactly. So that's why it has to be archived every single time.
I actually,
That's
but
what I'm
the
wondering
JavaScript is not enough, because the database is offline, or whatever, the JavaScript is loading.
Right, and so that, I think, comes back to why would you trust these entities with your data if that is going to be the way they decide that they will operate?
Right. That's a good point. That's
So,
a good point.
Twitter could definitely get rid of 99% of the JavaScript that they use and just
Exactly.
serve the actual text, and then we'd be fine. But if they
Right.
won't, how do we either convince them that they're doing it wrong and need to change, or do we just in fact move on to something else that does what we want it to do?
And I think-
that's what mass-
Cross that bridge when we get there, like, Twitter, tweets are archivable today, so I'm not sure what the problem is.
Yeah, that's a key thing is, I don't think this, I mean, everyone knows that people archive stuff on Twitter, from Twitter all the time on archive.org.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing. And there's even like Motherboard, Vice Motherboard has bots that will do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I picked
And
that
there's-
example, but
Well, no,
that-
still,
I
it's,
mean,
I think.
Well,
it's
not
okay.
all of the
Right.
tweets are archived.
I think we
Only
should
the
go
most
down this
popular.
Twitter thing a little bit more because we all understand Twitter, and like, I wanna understand it more. Are
Right.
all your tweets on the Internet Archive?
I'm pretty sure that not.
Since I added the archiving code, yes.
Okay.
Oh, you archive every single of your
Well,
tweets?
I guess just, I didn't mean that way.
No,
as
because
an
my
accusation,
tweets are just copies of what I post on my website.
Right.
Every post on my website links to its tweet copy. My code that crawls, that goes through and looks at every link and sends it to the Internet Archive is also sending the tweet copy to the Internet Archive. So since like 2016 or something,
Yeah.
all my tweets are like guaranteed on the Internet Archive.
I think we should look like how much each tweet in the archive version, how much it weighs, because I'm pretty sure it's at least a megabyte. I'm absolutely certain it's not less than a megabyte.
It only archives the JavaScript once if it's a common reference. You know, archive.org doesn't make an entire copy of the world every time you archive it.
I think
Well,
there's
it can
a bigger
change.
question here, right? And that is whether one archive can archive the rest of humanity. Right?
Exactly,
The answer is
exactly.
obviously no.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know, this space is cheap. I actually disagree with that.
Yeah.
No, seriously, like the text output of humanity is trivial compared to disk space now. Like,
Well, but you're talking about humanity, right?
like
The
you can
output.
put Wikipedia on your phone. The entire copy
Sure.
of Wikipedia.
Increasing
Right.
text is
Well-
not the important output.
Yeah, like-
Well, the problem is that like the
all
War
of
and
Twitter,
Peace,
all of
right?
Twitter.
The size of an average web page right now is larger than War and Peace, right? The famous novel by Tolstoy, right?
Yeah, but those
So-
are not, it's like loads up a JavaScript that's on some
Look,
shared URL.
I'm not exactly sure whether Web Archive archives it, but I know for sure that archive.is, it does archive every single JavaScript from every single page every single time. I know 100% about that. And
There's
I'm
multiple copies of the same
yes,
JavaScript?
yes, and I'm 90% certain that Web Archive does the same thing. I'm 90% certain. We could look at the source code and we can see how they reference those scripts. And I'm pretty sure they referenced it. I'm pretty sure they archive it multiple different times. I'm pretty sure it's at least a megabyte.
You're saying like, oh, it's impossible, this idea that we can, but if they do it, this is what archive.org does.
But they don't archive every single tweet. They archive.
It's incomplete though, that's.
They archive only when you ask them to. And people cannot ask for every single tweet. I would imagine that only like at most like 1 every 10,000 tweet gets archived, if at most that, or even less than that, right? And that's obviously the scale that they can cope with. But they wouldn't be capable of archiving every single tweet.
And we shouldn't get hung up on the JavaScript. I think that is a good question, but it's also daunting and maybe like we might be just in trouble with JavaScript. Like if we just focus on text and photos,
Right.
like maybe we can.
Well, but I think that's a problem. I think there should be a way to make the archives without the JavaScript. I think all of those sites, they should optimize for that, right? So, for example, for Twitter, right? If they optimize for every single tweet, if you try to run the archive thing, right? If they just give like the text itself plus maybe the pictures, right? Then it would completely solve the whole problem. But they don't.
But okay, for Twitter, you don't have to run the JavaScript. It's just you're either making a REST call and getting a JSON payload, or you have access to like a streaming API.
It's just JSON blobs.
This one.
It's just JSON blobs with metadata and links in it.
Well, so when you
Here's a completely self-serving counterexample, right? The thing that I was talking about this morning about making maps in my journal, right? They're JavaScript-based maps.
Right.
Without the JavaScript,
They don't work.
there is nothing there. You're not capturing the thing that I have created.
right,
So archiving just the text of that will get you the labels and the legend,
right,
but not the content.
right.
But you have the GeoJSON, right?
I have the GeoJSON, sure. And could somebody with the JavaScript reconstruct that? Sure, if they knew the exact piece of JavaScript that I used to render that.
Well, but this does get to, I guess, this gets to, all right, like, that's a use case you care very much about. And it may be the first time, maybe the first couple iterations of you exploring a use case, it would be a Foursquare or some other geolocal startup or organization. All right, but you've gone through enough iterations of that where you know what the minimal amount of data that needs to be captured to model what that is, so that you could archive.
Yeah.
So that little nugget of what you want to capture is always there for somebody.
Yeah, and
to
I'm
be able to
motivated
reproduce.
to do that for me, right? But if he would like to maintain a reference to the thing that I created,
Right.
is every person who's creating a reference motivated to make their reference archivable? The answer right now is no.
Right.
And I think it gets back a little to the, like we were talking about static sites and having.
Facilitating the Indie mail session.
Well, I'm guilty.
Oh, they're waiting for you.
Yeah,
I just wanted to tell you, there is somebody on the stream eagerly awaiting your
All
presence.
right, well, I have no idea what I'm gonna do or say.
Yeah. If it makes you feel better, no one ever knows.
I was just gonna say, I think we need to make it easier to archive and copy.
Right.
And like get it down to simpler, portable kind of formats that don't have a lot of dependencies. Like a year
Exactly.
ago, I had a blog post about proposing a blog archive format because unbelievably, 20 years after blogging, we do not have this. We have a lot of just WordPress's format and some other, the Tumblr export
Well, but I think
we need some simple.
If we had those documented at least, we could start with at least what are all the one-off formats? And
Yeah.
Has anybody tried?
Well, but I think if you actually look at the standards, I mean, if you're using the HTML5 properly, you're supposed to have like all the kind of. I mean, if we're basically talking about blog, right? There's absolutely zero reason to have JavaScript on your blog. I mean, it's all about text, right? Maybe for syntax highlighting, right? It's completely optional. So if we talk.
Good place to start because they're really well understood, and I agree with you with JavaScript. But
Right.
if we could do nothing except have
Right.
a really simple blog
Yeah.
archive format that you could open in any web browser, you could copy to any computer.
Well, it exists. It's called HTML5.
With a couple, so my suggestion was
CSS.
HTML in a certain format with micro formats, maybe throw in a JSON feed file or something on the side. But
Right.
yeah, but just a convention that is easy to copy around and easy to machine read.
I mean, there's already like Markdown, right? I mean, it's kind of. I personally kind of hate Markdown.
Can we wrap up this
Yeah.
the conversation that has a lot of things that people hate and that people don't like? It's really stressful. Sorry.
We are over time on this
Thank
session,
you.
so
As well.
I'd like to start the next one.
Cool. Well, thank you.
I thought Doug was waiting for you.
Yeah, I don't know how to work this thing, but you're not getting any sense of anybody on the other end there.
Okay, Doug was in there earlier. Let's go up.
Anybody who would like to go to that messaging slash email session?
What's in here again?
Well, let me make sure.
This is gonna be Peter's.
When I left, I told Doug you was in.
Getting started with Peter's.
Do we have a break time, or is this like we go through the
Ran right through the break.
The break.
Yeah, the break ended 5 minutes ago.
I can help with the documentation because I looked at all these formats. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, I imported them some. So.
Because you have to import that.
Yeah, I only import WordPress right now, but I've written code in all the other formats. So. They all have issues in different ways.
Come on. Is there a power switch for the projector?
Yeah, sometimes you have to click the wall button again.
Oh. Man, it's doing that thing where it's blinking
Where are
again.
the restrooms? Did we,
Between the elevators and the stairs.
between the elevators and the?
Yeah, go out here, go right.
Oh, there it goes. Wow, it's confusing the crap out of my laptop right now.
The other session was just closed off due to lack of participation.
Oh.
Shame, I was gonna watch that one later. But I think I took the
Yeah,
cherry.
I'll still talk to you about that after, or tomorrow sometime.
What's the current topic?
We were talking about user readers. Micro.block.
I guess we're gonna be on the same.
Bad.
I don't know if it was documented in detail.
Well, actually, I think the agreement was we would just talk to them tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
No, it was more the friction in having a non-micro.block site linked to a micro.block profile and the ease of use. I don't think we've gotten the ease of use yet.
Yeah, I need to hear about it.
So that was.
Why doesn't technology work?
Isn't that the long
There
standing?
we go. Job security. I'm seeing your screen.
Okay, you see there, it's flickering on the stream. So I'm trying to stabilize that. Okay.
I've been trying to replace all the people in my company with robots, but it hasn't.
I just realized I need to switch this to mirror. I hope this doesn't mess it up.
Non-loan services, the robots.
Okay.
That's my plan for job security. I become the robot maintenance guy.
Let's begin this session.
Thank you.
Okay. So getting started with readers. We are going to talk about hopefully a relatively simple path to getting set up using the reader apps that exist. I don't really have a solid plan for this session, so feel free to tell me if I am saying things that don't make sense or that you don't care about. So where do we start? Let's start with who here has a WordPress site? Okay, not as many as I was expecting. Because if you have a WordPress site, I have written a WordPress plugin that will go and basically just sign up for an Aperture account and set it all up and it just goes. But that is apparently not as relevant as I was expecting it to be. So let me explain a little bit about like the relationship between your website and the readers. Let's start with that. The idea is that we want your subscriptions and the things you're reading and the content that from the feeds that you're following to live somewhere that you control. That's the sort of IndieWeb version of looking at this, as opposed to like going and signing up for an RSS reader service and managing all your subscriptions there. The challenge is that it's actually a kind of a tough problem to create a service that manages subscriptions and does a lot of feed reading, and it is not necessarily practical to have everybody build their own into their own website. Which means it does make sense to have there be services to manage this. So how do we reconcile those two views, right? Of we don't want everybody to have to build their own feed subscription management stuff, and yet we also want you to be in control of it and have that data live somewhere that you choose. And then also use all these interoperable apps. So the idea with the way this microsub works and the spec works is it is a way to have your website tell the apps where to find content so that you can have it both ways. If you want the data to live on your own server and be part of your own website, you can. And for those who don't, you can use the service. So I'm going to go, wow, caps lock. I'm going to go, for example, log into Monocle. Monocle is a reader app. There is no, it doesn't store any data. It's just an interface to view this content. And when I log into Monocle, in order for this to work and like follow this goal, this IndieWeb goal, the thing I type in here has to be something that I control and is of my own choosing, and that is portable. So this is my website. I'm going to type in my website here. Then what happens is Monocle says, okay, cool, I know how to sign you in. That's IndieAuth. And your website's going to tell me where to get all this data from that is being gathered by the by your subscription management thingy. So that's gonna look like basically Monocle is going to go and fetch my website and then find these two things: where to sign you in and where to get your feed data from. If you look at my website, and if we go and do, hello, thanks for somebody for writing that. If you go and look at view source on my website, you will see a couple of things that make this work. One is this, which is how my website tells Monocle how to sign me in. And then the other one is this, which is how my website tells Monocle where to get this data from. And this is the key. Notice how this one's on my domain and this one is not. That's because I didn't want to go to the trouble of building all of this stuff into my own website. I wanted to do it as a service instead. So if you want this on your website, you need at least these two things. You actually need this one too, but these are part of the same thing. So you need to tell Monocle how to sign you in, and you need to tell where to get the data from. If you are using WordPress, then you can do this with plugins very easily. If you're doing it from scratch, you're going to have to like copy these HTML tags. So let's see. I'm on here. I'm on Monocle now. So I'm going to click login. Monocle is going to go fetch my website, find those tags, and then it's going to direct me over to, this may happen too fast. Yeah, it happened too quickly because this works too well. I'm already signed into my site, so what you didn't see was that this actually redirected me over to my website to sign me in, and then it redirected back. Now, Monocle then kept that Aperture link, and now everything you see here is because Monocle fetched it from there. Following so far? Okay, so if you want to do this on your website, you will need, maybe I can live code this as a demo. This always goes well. I have a test website for this purpose, for doing things like this. Test domain. Make a new folder called Austin. So I have a domain, avocado.lol, and I made a folder called Austin. Okay, so there's nothing in here yet. I make a new file called index.html. Say hello from Austin. All right, this is apparently index.html does not. All right, here's the web page. Very plain, nothing on it. The point is that this is supposed to demonstrate that you can do this with any thing that your website is running. What we need to do is so this is let's say this is my personal website. The idea would be that I go to Monocle and log in. I'm going to type this now instead. So this is my personal website, so I'm going to sign in as my test site. It's going to say, cool, we don't know how to sign you in yet, and we don't know where to get your subscriptions from. So where do we go? First we need, what's that?
Is there a video stream right now?
Should be. It's the same one as before, I didn't stop it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to deal with that later.
Is that linking to like how to fix it, or?
This one does not. So if you go to Quill, Quill does a good job of walking you through. So we're actually going to cheat and we're going to use that instead. So Quill will say, here's some steps to do. So Quill says, same thing, like we don't know how to sign you in, but here's how you can start. And it tells you, you can actually just copy this. Okay? And now if I save that and refresh this, great. Now can't find your token endpoint. Okay. Copy that. Can't find your microweb endpoint. This is for Quill. We don't need it for a reader, so we're going to skip this for now. Now if we go here and log in as it should say, aha, it took us over to the authorization endpoint to figure out how to sign us in. This is a step that you may not have to do depending on your site. If you're using micro.blog, micro.blog is its own login provider. Your website can be, your WordPress site is its own login provider. In this case, if you install the right plugin. In this case, we are not our own login provider, so we have to actually go and do one more step, which is to tell this service how to sign us in, which we're going to do with GitHub.
That bigger?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Okay. And then now if I click refresh, this site now knows we can go to GitHub to sign me in, but I have to go update my GitHub to link back to my test site, which I hope I can do. And now I'm my password manager. Because I did not prepare for this demo.
It's a little sweet.
All the best demos are unprompted.
GitHub. Okay. Please be a, oh. It's one of the long ones.
Always.
Cross your fingers. Okay. Great. So I go into GitHub and I edit my bio and I say that my website is this. Okay. Now, when I click on this, this says, cool. Okay. It says Monocle is asking for access to your website and it's requesting all of these scopes, which are microsub things. Click on this to do it, and it's going to take us over to GitHub. I'm logged into GitHub already, so you don't see me log in. And with any luck, great. Okay. Monocle signed me in, and now it says we don't know where your microsub endpoint is, which is where it's going to be getting all the data from. So now I need to go find a microsub server. I happen to know a great one. It's called Aperture. And this, sign out, I have to go in here to make an account. So if you go here and make an account, this is actually going to be a real test of this because I've not done this before as a new user in a long time. This is now doing the same process. How do we sign you in? Oh, we sign you in here. It's asking just for this scope. Let's go and click GitHub. Now I'm going to GitHub. and now I'm signed in. Okay, I have a brand new account on Aperture. This is what it looks like when you get a brand new account. You get 2 channels, and then you can make new channels. And it gives you this, which is to use Aperture as your Microsoft endpoint, add this HTML to your homepage. I'm going to copy that and put it here. Now, when I log into Monocle, Monocle says, cool, how do we sign you in? Go over here, I sign in, redirect it back to Monocle. Monocle should now find my Microsoft server, and now I'm logged in. Okay, so the point of this was to show you that you don't need a fancy website in order to be able to use a reader, because all you need to do is delegate out to services that do all the fancy bits for you. What's next? I guess I should add a feed.
Yeah, how do you follow someone?
Okay.
Like, you find a cool website.
Find a cool website to follow. So I'm over in, so Aperture is now where all your subscriptions live. I guess I should start this by saying, how do you, like in the previous session we were talking about moving web hosts, how do you handle the situation if you want to move to a different Microsoft server so that you know you're not trapped in this one? I was a bad internet citizen when I built Aperture, and I did not build in an export feature from the beginning. I should fix that very soon. But
You fix that soon?
I will fix it soon. But it at least does have an API, essentially, that you can use to export everything, worst case. But the point is, when I logged into Monocle, I did not tell Monocle, I didn't have to go and give it my Aperture account or anything like that, right? Like I'm telling Monocle my website, which means if I want to move off of Aperture, I need to go to my website and change this. And I would just change this to something else, like a different Microsoft server or a different, like maybe I move it into my website itself. And then I have to actually move the subscriptions over behind the scenes as well. But at least then I am in control of where this data lives, and the whole time it's my same identity, right? Okay. So with that out of the way, I'm going to go and go over to Aperture, which is where you go and add subscriptions, click New Source, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to go follow this Aaron guy. Find feeds. It's going to find a couple different versions of different ways to subscribe to me. We're going to go with this one because it has the best data in it, microformats, which is why it's at the top. Click follow. Okay. It's already found a bunch of posts. I'm going to go add contact.com. And follow contact.com. And we are going to follow manton.org. All right. Uh-oh. Sometimes it takes a minute for it to show up. Or it didn't.
So there could be a mistake in the microformats version.
So what
Try the JSON one.
I actually want to go to. It worked. My internet is just jumping onto the desk here. And then we're going to say render the content. Quill will help us debug this. Internet is so Quill is going to send access token in a header. It should tell us whether. H entry is telling it this is a post. Oh yeah, good. Apparently I haven't posted anything since I work on things, and at the end we'll do demos. So